We've got Chris and Courtney on this call. They'll be both doing the demo, the Q&A over Right-Click Tools Management Server. Both of them are fabulous Recast employees with great backgrounds, but you guys can read that part. I just want to do a fun fact. Fun fact about Chris is he likes to go camping and fishing in his free time. He does live in North Dakota currently, so his window for both of those activities is very small. And then Courtney likes to shoot pool in the free time, or her free time. And I've been told that she only plays on standard size pool tables. She won't do the smaller children's pool tables. I don't know, you have to take that up with her. So anyways, here's our agenda. So we're gonna do a quick intro to RMS, then we'll actually do the meat of it. We'll do the demo. Like I mentioned earlier, let's keep this very conversational. If you have any questions, throw them out in the Q&A section. Chris and Courtney will do a great job answering them. And then obviously, if you have any questions at the end, we will have a Q&A section as well. So from here, I think, Chris, you're going to take it away.
I sure am. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our webinar here. We'll be talking about the Recast Management Server. We like to call that RMS. And the RMS here can give admin additional capabilities for right-click tools and endpoint insights. Now, as a lot of you might not know, but this is something that is available to the enterprise users, and a lot of people aren't taking advantage of this. It's not something that is a requirement unless you do have endpoint insights, but it is something that we highly recommend that you use. This is something that can be set up on a server on its own, or it could be on the primary site server. It is kind of simplified. If you do install it on the primary site server, it will, during the configuration, set up a database, and that database can share the same SQL instance as your config manager database does. It'll just create a separate database called the Recast Management Server. And the size of that database can vary here depending on what you're going to be using the Recast Management Server for. All of those requirements, all that setup instruction can be found in our docs. We have a wonderful configuration video that was done by one of our technical support engineers, Brandon. I'm sure you're familiar with some of his videos, but he goes through a walkthrough and does a great job of explaining how to do some of the configuration. And any questions, of course, you can always shoot us over, open up a support ticket, and anything like that. All right. Now, enough about the configuration stuff. All that can be found on the doc site. Don't need to get too in the weeds here. We'll go ahead and we'll just get straight into why would you even be interested in installing this RMS, or why should you even care? Important stuff. Well, as I said earlier, it does add a bunch of additional features to right-click tools and endpoint insights that were not available without it. So it integrates with our products very well. And yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and we're going to launch into the demo here, and we're going to show all about it here. So I'm going to share my screen here. You have to stop sharing, Jeff. It does not allow me to take it. All right.
How about now?
There we go. We're good. All right. We should see a blank desktop here. We good?
Yep.
All
That's
right.
great.
Perfect. Perfect. So we're in the demo environment here, over here at Right-Click Tools, and we're just going to show our integration here in Configuration Manager. So this is the console, as you all are aware. So our Recast software dashboard here, it has a wealth of information. We have tons of things in here, but we do have the ability. We're going to configure our Recast server. This brings up our Recast server GUI. And this is where our Recast server is located. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a new web browser here, and we're just going to navigate to that. So this is the home page here of the Recast Management Server. As you can see, this is pretty plain, just our white screen here. We have some links to our doc site, but the most important thing here that was recently added is we have the RMS version number, which is very important for support and also for you guys to be aware. As with everything, we like to stay as current as possible with our software, just to make sure that all of the bugs and everything can be thought out there. So here on the side of our pane, you can see our different navigation tabs. We'll start with administration here. We'll expand that out, and you can see a ton of stuff that we've just revealed here. So what I will talk about here first is, as you can see, when we put this Recast Management Server URL in, our default port is 444, but I will say that you can change that during the configuration, no problem. A lot of users like to use 443 because that's already open and that's kind of an easier pass. You don't have to do an additional security request or anything like that. But our default port is 444 here. And so we'll get right into our agents tab here. And this is where you can view the Recast agents installations in your environment. And from this view, you can approve and delete those agents. Now, they do have to be approved in order for them to be used. They do allow, the Recast agent allows for additional features to be used in the environment. One of those things is it runs as a service on the devices, and it will allow the right-click tool action to be run in the system context instead of being used or instead of having that user that's running the action be a local admin. So it does allow for additional features, and this is helpful, say, in an entrusted domain, or possibly you have some other work group that you have devices in and you want to run the right-click tools there. So here you can see those installations and you can see those versions. You can see whether or not they're connected, and that's great information here.
Hey, Chris,
Now,
what happens if you have a CMG?
So if you have a CMG, we do have the ability to run the right-click tools over the fast channel, I believe.
Yes, using the Recast agent.
There we go. So using the Recast agent. Now, moving on to our next tab here, we're going to talk about the audit log. And this is something that allows the admin to keep track and view actions that are run against the Recast Management Server here using the right-click tool. So as long as your Recast Management Server is connected, you can see all the actions that are being run, and you can see who ran them here, and if there's any information available there. So if I were to go back into Configuration Manager here, and I were to just go pull up a device here, and I wanted to say, view system information here. That system information on that device will load. And if I go back into my audit log here and refresh, you can see that my username here ran this action, and this is the execution time that it took. And that is very helpful if you're trying to do any sort of troubleshooting, or if you need to find out if what your users in your environment are doing, or if there's anything that needs to be tracked and that sort of thing. Next, we'll move on to licenses here. And here is where, as it suggests, all the licenses are stored, and you can easily look at your device count. You can upload a new license if that time is available once you're doing the renewal. And you can, of course, all the licensing can be found in the portal here. And you can see that you can download your licenses for right-click tools. And this is also where you can find the download for the Recast Management Server. Just a little segue there. And lastly here for me, I'll talk about logging. So logging has the ability to show real-time logs from the management server. It will say that this tab here has to be open as you are doing your troubleshooting. It has to be its own tab here, and it has to be open. You can see it's already populated here because something was run on the server. And this will show very verbose logging. And this is generally used if there's an issue in the environment. Maybe you're having some connection issues with the agents, possibly any other connection issues just with the Recast Management Server, Support, when you do contact support for those, they will ask for this information here, and this is how you would collect it, and you could download it here and provide it to support. But it also does, if you were so inclined, you could also review this log yourself to see if you could find any sort of troubleshooting or any issues that were going on. And that is all I have to talk about for now. I'm going to go ahead and pass this off to Courtney, and she will talk about permissions.
Yeah, it looks like we actually have one question from Scott that
Fantastic.
our old recast agents cleaned up automatically in any way in RMS. Do you know the answer, Chris?
I believe that they are not, from the support calls that I have been on, but Courtney, you can justify or verify.
So they'll clean themselves up if after so many days, if they've been uninstalled, if the recast agent has been uninstalled. Most of the time it doesn't actually, it won't clean up if it's just been disconnected, because we do have with the CMG, they won't actually be able to connect to the Recast Management Server. So they'll show not connected, but they'll show installed. So they'll still be in there if you need to, but it's just so you can see if they've been authorized, and you can deauthorize them if you want. And then we have another question. We have many Azure AD joined devices connected through a CMG. Is there a way to have them automatically approve if we install the agent on them? They are not joined to a domain other than Azure AD. Great question. I can show you that on my screen. If you want to go ahead and stop sharing, Chris, that would be great. So we actually have under settings the ability to approve agents, which is a setting down here. So we can do the recast agent approval. So you can actually set that setting to automatically approve agents in trusted domains, or you could do automatically approve all agents, or you can just do it manually. So you can change those settings. I believe on our doc site, there's also a way to just automatically if you've have a bunch of agents in there already and they're not authorized, we have a SQL query you can run to automatically authorize all of those as well. Let's see, let's go down to permissions. So for our permissions, we actually do role-based authentication. So you can use Active Directory to authenticate using either you can directly add someone like we have here. We have Marty added directly, or you can use an AD group. In that case, we have those will show us true. And so we have a sales demo group as well as like an engineering group. So you can add multiple user groups in here. And using the edit button, you can go ahead and assign them a role. So automatically it just comes up with the administrator role. We do have a template that you can download off of our website to go create a read-only type role if you just want them to be able to read. And then you can also customize permissions from there. So if you're working on a role where you want to give certain access to things, just come in here, create a new permission role, name it something, and then you can go ahead and start selecting what permissions you would like them to have. For this, it's really granular. So based on exactly what you want to give them access to, there's usually a permission for all of that. So if you want them to be able to get things, those are usually read type permissions. And then usually there's an action word for, what you're trying to do. So add, delete, remove, things like that. So you can give them access to what you're looking for. If you are looking for something specific, filter is great. So if it's, I really want to be able to let them ping, I can search for ping and I see that it's under network if I'm looking for something specific. For Builder, if you guys are into Builder and Runner, you actually have access to be able to give access to specific Builder actions. So if you've created one and shared it out with someone using just the right-click tool standalone, which is pretty much just not connected to the Recast Management Server, they would have the ability to use them. If you use the Recast Management Server, you can actually just give them access to the ones that you want per role. So you don't have to give them access to all of the builder actions you've created. And you can give them access to make more if you want, or limit their use in here. If you're kind of having, sometimes the roles can get a little tricky if you're trying to look for something specific. A trick that I kind of use is the audit log. So this action is the name of the permission that they would need. So if Chris was having some issues and couldn't use system information, I would come in here. This is the name of the action that he needs access to. I could also see in the view results that he would be getting an error message that says insufficient recast permissions. And then I know this is the permission that he needs to have access to. So then I could go back into the roles and go ahead and give him access to that. This also allows you to have one license instead of multiple licenses. If you're using standalone, you have to license every single right-click tools, whereas this license will have them all in one place, so you don't have to keep sending out the license for people. And it's all housed in one location. Also with permissions, you can also, as well as changing what right-click tool actions they have access to, you can also assign them to scopes. And scopes work similar to how they do in Config Manager or ADs, where it limits what they have access to, whether it's an OU, a domain, things like that, where you can actually limit to specific collections if you want users to have access to. But this doesn't give them more access than they would have access to in Config Manager. So if you're already scoping, say, a help desk person so that they cannot see servers or certain collections, our tools don't give them access to that. They still won't be able to see it in Config Manager and therefore won't have the right-click tools available. But I have seen in environments where they want people to view certain collections but not actually have access to use the right-click tools on those collections. And then we have a proxy. So one of the most question I have received when talking about Recast Management Server is, what is the proxy and do I need to install it? So there's the option to not install the proxy, but I would recommend using it. It gives you some more functionality into the Recast Management Server, as well as it is a way to get around permission restrictions in your environment. If you have environments where there's like our tools require local admin access, and if you're trying to get rid of that, so you don't trust maybe the help desk to be local admin on a device, you can use what we call a Recast Proxy and use that instead. So that would be just a service count. You would give that service count local admin access, and then you can actually route the tools through that proxy. So here's where you can kind of set up what is used to run the action. So once you've given permission to run for a user to use one of the right-click tools, you can actually go over here to the route, and this is the order of which they do it. So it goes from top to bottom. First, we have it set right now to use a service count first. So we will use the proxy and run it through there. If for some reason like in this second one, it's scope to sales. So if that right-click tool wasn't part of, wasn't a sales approved action, then it would skip this route and go down to the next one. So a lot of times the Recast agent will be up the top if you're using Recast agent. This is needed for the fast channel. So if you have a CMG, you can use the Recast, or you can use Config Manager fast channel and actually put it below the Recast agent. And then if the agent is shown as installed and fast channel capable, but it's not connected, it will go down to the Config Manager fast channel route and use it that way. And it pretty much just sends a script over the fast channel and sends back the results. It's a slight misnomer as it is not super fast, mostly because just, it's going over the internet instead of on your local network. So it's a little bit slower, but I didn't name it. So you can yell at Microsoft for that one. So when you're have your routes configured in the order which you want, you can go ahead and hit save. It's easy to create a route over here. And things like the service count, Recast Proxy, this is great for if you have like multiple domains and you have an account that you want access to in one domain, but you don't want to have access in a different domain. So you can use a combination of multiple proxies and then have the proxy scoped to that domain. So you would add a scope in here for the specific domain, and then you would assign it to that service count. So that service count will pretty much only work in the domain that you have scoped for. Looks like we have a question here. It says, it seems like there's a lot of permission options for someone just getting started on Recast Management Server. Do you have any resources for the best practices or where to start for setting up the roles? So that's in our documentation page, which I have pulled up here. It would be under configuration, and we have some permission starter templates. So we have a read-only access that Brandon created, and these are all the permissions it gives. A lot of the right-click tools, if you go under and then go to features and you find the feature that you're trying to give access to, at the bottom of the page, there'll be permissions that are needed for that device or for that action. So for like Remote Software Center, so these are the recast permissions that are needed for Remote Software Center to work. And some of these, you know, if you don't want them to install an application, just don't have that one selected. But if you want to give them like the full functionality of the Remote Software Center, you go ahead and add the permission for this.
Also to add on to that, Courtney here. So also on our document side, I put it in the chat here, but Brandon has also created some other templates. So not just that read-only template. I believe he has possibly 4 or 5 other templates available here. And those are just text files that you can use in SQL to apply those permissions. It's under the permission templates down at the bottom.
Ah, there we go. So we do have some more templates. So they're in here if you need them. And Brendan has a nice video that you can watch too as well, if you're more of a visual learner. So I did briefly mention over here in settings, but so those settings that you'll see in the standalone version. So a lot of these, if you open the configure recast, because I'm connected to the Recast Management Server, I have a lot less tabs over here in configure recast. That's because those settings moved to the Recast Management Server. So now they are housed in here, and you can actually set it for everyone instead of individuals. So you can add things like the your SQL information for config manager database, wake on land, things like that. If a lot of times some environments, especially for VPN, they have ping disabled in their environment. So you can go ahead and turn that setting off in here if you want for everyone. Two kind of important, I think, settings for the recast management specifically is this max audit log and max snapshot age. So I'm going to get to those or the snapshot in a second, but if you're having space issues or you don't want the database to get too big, this is by default. We'll keep everything for infinity, so it'll be all zeros, but you can set the age here. So if you notice maybe it's taking a lot of space, or if you only want to keep records for a certain amount of days, you can go ahead and set those in here as well. You also have things like MBAM. If you're still using MBAM, you can add the SQL Server information and enable remote registry, PS remoting. And then if you use ServiceNow, you can actually put in your ServiceNow instance in here, and people can then use the ServiceNow right-click tool. So let's see. We'll go down to warranty. So if you have endpoint insights, you also have the ability to see warranty information. So this tab will only show up if you also have an endpoint insights license. And this is where you can, if you want, run the EI warranty scan manually. You don't have to. It does run on a schedule. But if for some reason you maybe added a ton of devices and you just want to kick off the scan right now, you can go ahead and click the button here, and that kicks off the scan. And then one of the unique features of Recast Management Server is the dashboards, the web version of dashboards. This does require the proxy to be installed. This gives you some extra functionality and ability for you to give access to the dashboards that are in right-click tools without having to give someone access to the config manager console. So a lot of people like this for managers who you do not trust to be in config manager, but you want to give them access to see the compliance, things like that, maybe security as well. So in here, you can go ahead and select what you want to look at. And we're going to select the Active Directory cleanup tool. And then we'll select, let's see, Recast Workstations. So this works just as they kind of does in the right-click tools, where you can see the 80 cleanup dashboard, BitLocker lapse, and software updates. But you're able to actually hit this little button right here. And this is what we call a snapshot. This is how you create a snapshot, or one of the ways actually to create a snapshot, where you can go ahead and name the snapshot. So it creates a link that you can then share and just call it demo. So then it produces a snapshot. Then you can give this URL to someone else and be like, here, you can look at this demo. You might have to give them access to view in the permissions in the Recast Management Server, but you would only need to give them access to view the dashboards and potentially trends as well. So this is great to create a shareable link. And if you need to go see old snapshots, you can go ahead and click on here as well, and you can see all the snapshots people have created. You also might have noticed in these dashboards as well is there's this little button. So there's actually another way to create a snapshot. If you have the Recast Management Server, you can go ahead and create here. So if you're in the right-click tools using it, you can go ahead and hit the create snapshot, and it also creates another snapshot. So you can then share this with management or someone that might not have config manager access. And then if we go back here, we can also set up trends, what we call trends. So what trends are is it pretty much set up at whatever interval you would like. You can go ahead and have it take a snapshot. So it just takes, similar to in those tabs, it will take a snapshot, and you can set a time and interval of some sort, maybe once a week, maybe every day, maybe only during the weekdays. I would label it something. So pretty much whatever settings you have in the dashboard you're looking at, that is what it will translate into the trends. So if I did it only on the Recast workstations, I would want to label this something maybe like Recast workstations. And then it will start creating what we call a trend. And when you first set it up though, when you hit the button, it just comes here and it's blank because it hasn't had the ability to run yet. So don't be afraid. The next time that whatever interval you set is triggered, you'll start seeing these little dots pop up. And all these dots will represents your compliance. And you can set up multiple trends. So we have one for our workstation and our servers. And I can see that, oh, it dipped for a little while, and I can actually click on one of those snapshots and see why. So I can look in here and be like, oh, it looks like we added maybe some test computers that there happen to only be an Active Directory, or maybe they got deleted, or you can go track it down if, maybe your compliance starts dropping, things like that. You can also download these images from hit save as image and then send that also to security or management and be like, look at our compliance numbers, they're looking so good, things like that. Or they can go ahead and click on any of these to see what was going on at that time.
Hey, Courtney, I'm going to jump in here. We did just release a blog on the 4 different trend dashboards as well.
Yeah, looks like Chris has added some links in there.
And we do have one
in
question
chat.
from Scott, if you scroll up a little ways through the chat.
Yeah, can you talk about how the client communicates with RMS? Is it strictly 444, and which direction does the traffic flow, etc.? So we by default just choose 444 because usually it's not used by anything on the server. But during setup, you can actually specify what port you want to use. Chris talked about it a little bit. So you can use, some people do choose to use 443. You can't use it if you're actually installing the config or the Recast Management Server on the config manager server, because that port is already being used by config manager. But if you do it on a remote server, which you're more than welcome to, you can go ahead and change the port if you have something specific, or if you just want to allow 444. So it does need traffic flow both directions, as it downloads things like the license, grabs settings, things like that, as well as it sends information for like the audit log as well. So there's communication both directions, and you can see the audit log is producing all the things I've been doing for this past little demo. So it connects to the right-click tools, and you can always verify that in Recast software, and you can see that in here it says connected. This is the server version, things like that, that kind of information, and it grabs that from the Recast Management Server. Is there any other questions? Doesn't look like it. So the nice thing about Recast Management Server is we're pretty flexible. It really just needs a SQL database somewhere. It can be remote. It doesn't have to be on the same server. And then it just needs IIS. Most of it is just the web page that you can grab, get to from any link, and then just use a web browser that's not Internet Explorer. Internet Explorer is dead. Please don't use it. I know some servers still have only Internet Explorer. Just use it either use a browser on your workstation or download something that's not Internet Explorer. Thank you. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. And we, with also Enterprise, you do get unlimited support. So if you're running into trouble, if you want to try installing it yourself and need help, or if you want us to hold your hand through the process, we can set up a support call or help you through our documentation site as well. So there were some links to that. So you can, if you want to install the Recast Management Server, or if you want to install the proxy, would highly recommend with the proxy. But if you do happen to install the Recast Management Server, during that installation, there is a proxy portion of it where you can install it at the same time. But if you hit skip, or you're like, I don't need it right now, and you decide later that you do in fact need it, you can download it off of the our portal and download it or install it separately. And that those kind of instructions are in the Recast only. So it would still combined into the Recast Management Server. So when you update the Recast Management Server, as long as the proxy is installed on the same server, it will also update the proxy. If you have a situation where you're using it for another domain, you will need to install the proxy in that domain using the service count that is applicable in that domain. And then you can go ahead and you'll need to update that manually when you update the Recast Management Server. Kind of good rule of thumb that I like to follow is if I always update the Recast Management Server first, and try to keep the Recast Management Server and the right-click tools on the same main version, which is like 4.7 or 4.8, the first two numbers, because that they are usually backwards compatible, but sometimes depending on the changes made, they, you know, there might be something that doesn't work as well, or needs to be the Recast Management Server and the right-click tools need to be on the same version. But they are in place upgrades. So you just usually you run the installer and there's one button that says update and you hit update and it does everything for you. So usually there's very limited downtime, pretty much however long it takes the installer to run. And then if you're also looking when installing the Recast Proxy and you need to know what kind of access you need, we do have that in our documentation as well. Most of the time it just needs the bare minimum of read-only analyst and config manager, and then DB data reader for the config manager database. And that's to be able to get things like the scope and be able to kind of populate those trends and those dashboards. It just needs read access. If you want to use it instead as more of a true proxy where it elevates privileges and is used as a local admin, it will need local admin access on the devices you want to use it for. And then there's a little bit more access it needs if you have endpoint insights and are using and want warranty data. We use that proxy to be able to write into the config manager inbox, the DDM box for the information we grab after we grab the device warranty information. Let's see, it looks like we got some questions. Can these dashboards be sent to management via link? Would like to be able to share a live version rather than an image so they can periodically check it on their own. Yes, so you would just give them a recast or a role that would just pretty much have the recast management server abilities. Most of those are under administrator. So you would give, there's things like if you want them to be able to create a trend or maybe delete trends, but there's some trends list in here, get trends, get list in there. You'll need list of, let's see, we need a few permissions under administrators. I think there's a template for that, but if not, if you're having trouble figuring out what exact permissions are needed, feel free to reach out to support and we can help guide you into what specifically you need for what you're trying to accomplish. But yes, you can give them just access to pretty much the right-click tools, pretty much just like that dashboard section if you want. I have seen a customer that just, wanted to give them just this bottom part access, and you can definitely do that with our permissions. And then does RMS interact with other Recast products or just the right-click tools? So it does interact with endpoint insights. That is how we grab the device warranty information for endpoint insights. It currently does not interact with Shift Left, which is our ServiceNow integrated product, but it does do the right-click tools and endpoint insights as well. So you can see your licenses in here. If you have endpoint insights, enterprise is your right-click tools, and if you have automation and kiosk is part of that as well. Great questions. Any other questions or anything? All right, I think I'm mostly talked out. Unless anyone has any other questions. Nobody wants to hear me listening or talking for 20 more minutes, we can cut this early. I could talk about the right-click tools too. Jeff has a little extra.
All right, Courtney, I'm gonna take it back. Thank you both, Courtney and Chris, for fabulous demo. So as we've been trying to, get a few more questions these last few minutes, if they come through, great. If not, let's kind of continue on trucking. as we've kind of alluded to a few times throughout this webinar, we do have another product, or one of our other product offerings is called Endpoint Insights. We've got 3 more webinars, all kind of focused on what Endpoint Insights is, maybe some of the less talked about features, and the next one is July 12th. And that one goes really well with what we just talked about today, how right-click tools and Endpoint Insights work together. So I know Courtney gave you a very small taste with one of those Endpoint Insights warranty reports. This will be a much further deep dive into the story and the benefits of those 2 pieces of software working together. So sign up for those, attend, they're a lot of fun. We do $100 gift card giveaways to 4 people per webinar. Usually I'm on there, Courtney's on there sometimes, Chris usually is on the back end. So it's pretty fun, pretty casual. And if you missed it earlier throughout the webinar, here's our very lengthy documentation site, which you can also, we've posted in the chat a few times. You can also find at recastsoftware.com's or our webpage. But all the good Recast documentation there is Recast Management Server. But like Courtney and Chris have both mentioned, support is free, it's unlimited. If you need someone there to kind of hold your hand or just to ping a question off of, reach out. Everyone's super happy to talk to our customers. So don't feel like you are a bother, or that if you reach out, you won't hear back for 6 weeks. Our turnaround time is very fast. That's all we've got. Courtney, Chris, thank you. Do you guys have any final words?
Thanks everyone for coming.
Thanks everyone for showing up. We appreciate you.
Yeah.
Cool. And like I mentioned earlier, we will share the recording of this webinar training either this week or early next week with the holiday and everything coming up. So yeah, thank you. Oh, wait, hold on. Do we have some more questions come through? No, just kidding. All right.
No, just saying
Bye.
thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.